Hey guys, this is Jake from State Fun. Who else wants to see this house car Cummins swap project get started? First start video coming up. So some of the things I know I want to get done before I do a first start on this is I want to get the clutch master cylinder mounted and functional, get a brake booster and the brake master cylinder hooked up, get the steering shaft hooked up, try and get the wiring for the battery and all of the park lights, brake lights, headlights, alternator, maybe see if we can get the dummy lights for coolant temperature, oil pressure, all of that hooked up. We'll get a belt here on the front. I think that'll be about it before we're ready to do a first start on here. All right, so we're kind of trying to mesh parts of wiring harnesses off of the old house car with the 91 Cummins. So one thing that I want off of here, I've already got the wires that ran for the brake lights and park lights to the rear. The other thing I want off of here is this wiring harness here. That includes all the pins that go through the firewall for the ignition wire and the starter wire, as well as for the dummy light on the oil pressure and the dummy light for the coolant temperature. So we're probably actually going to pull those oil pressure senders and the coolant temperature sender out, since I know that those have the right plug-ins. And we'll disconnect the wires and pull all the different little clips out, and then we'll go over to the Cummins and we'll pull out the parts that I want to keep from it, like the voltage regulator, intake heater, relays, and wiring harness. And I'm not sure if there's anything else, but we'll figure that out when we're over there. Well, we're over here in the trees with the Cummins cab, and a few things I want to grab off of it. I want to grab that voltage regulator right there. I'll probably just clip these wires and keep this little harness connector thing, so I can make my own cable connectors as I need. Let's see, there's a alternator wire connector right there, and that'll run over to the battery somewhere. I'll try and get this brake booster off of here. The wires for the relays here, so the relays and the wires themselves, this is for the intake heater, so I want to grab that. And I don't think there's anything else on here that I'm wanting to grab, so I'll pull those things off and then we'll be ready to mesh things together. It's the wrong color green. We'll move on probably to the alternator, get the wire ran over to where the battery should be, and get the voltage regulator hooked up. This blue and green wire right there are the two that are going to connect to the blue and green wire on the voltage regulator, and then we'll tackle something else after that. So here's the brake booster and the old push rod from the non-powered brake cylinder out of the house car. Now the brake booster rod is entirely too short, so my plan is to take the adjustable piece of this push rod here, cut this off right about there, cut this guy off right about there, and then weld those two pieces together, and that actually gives me the length that I need to reach the brake pedal. Same thing on the clutch pedal. So I'm gonna go ahead and try and work that out and get it cut and nice and even, ground down a little bit and weld it together. As you can see, my plan basically includes cutting the end of the old shaft piece off into what looks essentially like a bolt, and then welding that bolt to the push rod. Well, we got these things welded on. Welds are absolutely ugly, and they're not perfectly straight, but I think they'll do. Let's go get these things installed. You may be wondering about this shaft here. This is actually the clutch shaft. I figured out how to pull it out of the whatever that's called. There was essentially a C-clip holding this plastic section in here, and then the whole thing kind of just lifted out of the casing. It has this spring on the end, so I'm gonna put that back together and show you all how it goes together. If you want to take it apart, just do the opposite. I think I'm gonna go ahead and bring the die grinder out here and make a little notch in here, a couple spots, so that these little corners can slip past. The way this is designed is kind of got a square overlaid over the circular, whatever it's called. So with the die grinder, I can make a slot for this to kind of be able to slip past, and I can turn the whole assembly sideways, turn it clockwise or counterclockwise just a little bit to lock it in place. Got a master cylinder for the brakes put up or connected. I do need to bleed the brakes, and I also need to bleed the clutch because I had it open for that rod extension. But I'll do that in the future as well. Right now, what I think I want to tackle is the steering. So I got the air jack out, got the front end jacked up. Went ahead and got the wheels very straight. At least as far as I can tell, they're straight. And pulled the driver's side wheel off. Here's the steering shaft that goes to the steering box. And here's the steering shaft for the steering wheel from the 62. Now it looks like it might be pretty close to the same size rod as what would stick up in here. So my thoughts are, I'll cut this off right there. I should be able to get it fit inside of there, and then I can weld it to this all the way around and through that little hole right there. That'll provide a strong connection for steering. Well, it's attached, and as you can see, it's not completely straight, but it rotates. I don't think that'll be too big of an issue. It's not like it's a drive shaft or something that's going to cause vibrations when I turn the wheel. It's just going to be a little bit wonky. It seems to have held up to me turning the wheel with the truck sitting still. At least that small little test there makes me think it'll probably hold. There's a lot less forces on this thing on the steering shaft when the power steering pump is hooked up and running, and two, when you're actually moving forward or backwards. With the truck completely off and sitting still, turning the wheel is probably the most force you're ever going to notice on that steering shaft, and it held up to a few turns both directions, so I think we're going to be okay. Well, there's the throttle cable hooked up. So this is a cable out of a 91 Suburban. It's normally used for the throttle body or the TVI 350 engine in there. And this little slip thing here fits kind of tightly right over the nipple of that throttle thingy, throttle actuator. Sure, that works. Then I ran the cable up, took the cable clamp off the old choke cable, and I clamped the cable down to the intake. And then that allows me to adjust this throw for the throttle pedal. Now, this little bracket here is actually flipped upside down from what it was in the house car originally. So now it's a pull throttle instead of a push throttle. Parking brake cable is about 6 inches shy of being able to be hooked up. I've got about 2 inches here. I could lengthen it, but that's obviously not going to be enough. So what I think I'm actually going to do, I'm going to take this nut off, and then I'll go ahead and hook up the parking brake cable up inside the cab, and then I'll relocate that front bracket right up there further forward wherever it needs to be for that cable. And then I'm going to take this little nut to Lowe's, see what thread pitch it is, and see if I can find a turnbuckle that'll actually fit. Because then with the turnbuckle on there, I can screw a bolt into the other side, and I can provide that extra length but still be able to adjust it. So that little eyelet is what's going to hold this side of the parking brake cable, because that's a left-handed thread bolt, and I obviously can't use a standard thread bolt in a left-handed thread socket. So, and then we're going to use the fact that it's a turnbuckle to tighten it up. We don't want this cable too tight because we don't want it applying parking brakes when we're not pulling the handle, but we also want it to be tight when we do pull the handle. So I may end up needing to adjust this once I get kind of going and see if it holds well enough or not. I'm going to go ahead and pull the handle and we'll make sure this works. It definitely seems to have tightened up pretty good. That probably locked the brakes, but I won't know until I can actually roll them around to see if it's going to work or not. Alright, well I think I'm finally about ready to actually get started on the wiring. I could have started after I got this brake booster and master cylinder in, because that kind of tells me whether or not what spaces I have open to be able to use for mounting things. First thing is the battery. I gotta figure out a place for the battery, and I'm pretty sure it's gonna go right here. So let's see how the mic would fit. Alright, so I went ahead and revisited the coolant temperature switch and the oil pressure switch from the 62, and I was able to get those out with a couple sockets. So now we're gonna find the ones on the Cummins. So according to the Googles, this guy right here is a coolant temperature sensor. That makes sense because it's in the head and not the intake. And then down under here, that is apparently the oil pressure sensor. I'm gonna try pulling both of those out, and hopefully we'll get lucky that the threads are the same as my old 62 one. Just by looking at it, I don't think it's gonna be the right threads. Nope, entirely too small. Alright, so I'll see if I can find an adapter for whatever thread pitch this is to whatever thread pitch that is. Meanwhile, we'll move on to pulling the oil pressure sensor out down there. Look at how tiny that thread is. It's a freaking huge bolt. Alright, well at least one worked. Alright, so this black wire right here runs down to the starter. I'll just confirm that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to extend this purple wire from the wiring harness. I'm going to extend that over here, connect to the black one. This red wire I'm going to connect to the red constant power that goes to the key ignition. And then my key ignition wire here, I'm going to extend that out here to the fuel solenoid. And that'll be pretty much all of the engine management wiring. That should be enough to get this thing up and running. Now to make it actually kind of finished more so, I'll have to extend my oil pressure light wire here so that it'll reach the oil pressure sensor. The coolant light wiring should be good. I just got to get that coolant temp sensor in. I'll have to hook up the park light wires for the hood once the hood's on there. I need to hook up the rear brake light, park light, and turn signal lines. Fuel relay, does that click on? Here, click. That's a good sign. Let's hook up the fuel connector and see if she'll actually crank. This is an exciting and scary moment. That's probably gonna fall over, but that's okay. All right, ready? Here we go. It's a running Cummins in the house car. This 62 Chevy is gonna ride good. We were able to get the brakes working, got the clutch working. Steering should work, but we didn't test it. Parking brake works, but this alternator is not currently working. That turns out to be an issue in my wiring. This blue wire right here actually needs to get key ignition as well as the connection to the alternator. So I'll fix that in the future. And then we'll get on to coolant and oil pressure sensor and stuff like that. But overall, that's exciting. Oh man, I'm ready to drive this thing around. All right, I think next step is gonna be hooking up the intake heater relays. I haven't figured out how I'm gonna get them power yet, but I'm gonna go ahead and get them mounted and get the at least the relay wiring done as far as the feed to the intake, and then we'll wire up the relay switching power later once I get some toggle switches and determine how I'm gonna do that. My plan is this choke cable. Try and use it to toggle the switch on and off. So inside the truck, when it's cold, I can pull the choke cable, turn the heater on for 10 or 15 seconds, shut it back off, and then crank the truck up. I think that would be kind of cool. So nice sneaky way to put it in there too. Let's go get the coolant sensor hooked up while we're here. See if I can get y'all close up. Luckily, the wire for the coolant sensor is right here. There it is. All right. Yep, it shows low coolant temp there. And it shows no oil pressure, which is good because it's not running. So the head is cold and there's no oil pressure running. So we're gonna check the charging system now, see if hooking up that wire actually fixed it. And we're also going to watch the oil pressure light and make sure it goes out when I crank it up. Alright, let's see. Oil pressure light's on and... oil pressure light went out. Yep, 13.7. Looks like it's charging. Now let's see if the engine cuts off when I turn the key off. It did. Woo! Well guys, I think that pretty much wraps up this video. The only wiring aspects that I've got left to do is the generator light on the dash to let me know when the alternator is not charging, the fuel level wire and gauge for the cluster in here, and the air conditioning wiring. Now the AC wiring will actually be done when we install the vintage air kit, because it'll be a whole kit and controller. So that'll be in a future video. Make sure you subscribe so that you see that when I do get it installed. In general, it's been an exciting video. We got our first start in. We got all of the wiring kinks mostly worked out. I've thoroughly enjoyed this, and I hope y'all have too. So go ahead and do me a favor, hit the like button down below to make sure that I know you did enjoy it. And I'll leave y'all out on another startup. Y'all have a good one.